with all of you for what is a very big deal. It's a very big announcement. Just to put some perspective of the magnitude of what we're here to announce today, if finalized, today's announcement would amount to the largest deregulatory action in the history of the United States. It's also great to be here specifically at Kenworth, grateful to our hosts, joined by Secretary Chris Wright, Governor Braun, Congressman Baird, and so many other leaders from the state level, the local level, leaders in industry, and we couldn't possibly find a better reason for all of us to be getting together for today's announcement. Now, there might be some coverage from reporters nationally that would like to twist what we are announcing here today. I would ask, would you want the administrator of the EPA to be ignoring the Supreme Court decisions in West Virginia versus EPA, Michigan versus EPA, ignoring the decisions in Loper Bright? Should the Environmental Protection Agency be ignoring the major policy doctrine? Do you really think that the EPA should be coming up with all of the many mental leaps that went into this endangerment finding that took a section of the Clean Air Act, 202, and put an extremely creative and unprecedented spin on it? See, some would like to simplify what the endangerment finding is by just saying carbon dioxide endangers human health and the environment and welfare. Now, that is a very oversimplified statement to the point that it's just not accurate when you look at what the endangerment finding did. Now, I'm going to follow the law and making sure I don't prejudge outcome of this rulemaking. We are going to have a public comment period, one that has not taken place on the endangerment finding over the course of the last decade and a half. We want to hear from the American public to finalize a regulation that not only proposes to rescind the endangerment finding, but all greenhouse gas emissions that followed on light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles. It is important for us to understand that what the EPA did was many mental leaps in trying to creatively interpret Section 202 of the Clean Air Act. They said that carbon dioxide, when mixed with several other well-mixed gases, some of which, by the way, aren't even emitted from mobile sources. So in doing this review, it was specifically for mobile sources. And the EPA said that carbon dioxide, when mixed with a bunch of well-mixed gases, many of which aren't even emitted from mobile sources, that contributes to global climate change. They didn't say causes, they say contributes. Now, you might ask how much. They don't say how much. The amount is north of zero. We know that much. And then they say that climate change endangers public health and welfare. Now, if you're following all of the mental leaps there, they then rely on assumptions that ended up not being true. They ended up making predictions about the science that in many respects were not just pessimistic, they turned out not to be true. And for the first time ever, the EPA, in an effort to combat global climate change, end up deciding to reach this endangerment finding and then put forward trillions of dollars of regulations that hit mobile sources, stationary sources, airplanes. Now, where did this power come from, one might ask? Well, some don't want to ask. And I'll tell you, when the Supreme Court ruled in Loper Bright overturning the Chevron doctrine and making it clear that I, as administrator of EPA, that agencies of this federal government do not have the ability to just creatively come up with our own law. We do not have that power on our own to decide as an agency that we are going to combat global climate change because we give ourselves that power. We will follow the law. If Congress wants to amend Section 202 of the Clean Air Act and tell us that they want us to be regulating the heck out of carbon dioxide, methane, and these other greenhouse gases, then we'll follow the law. And in the meantime, we're going to follow the law. The economic consequences of the electric vehicle mandates that followed, all of the added costs to light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles, the practical application of all of those new regulations leading to added costs, which leads to Americans getting older vehicles that actually don't operate as efficiently as the newer ones because people can't afford it. Now, last November, the American public spoke. They elected President Trump, President of the United States. That was the will of the American public. And when they voted, they asked for, demanded that an agency like the EPA would be cognizant of their economic concerns, that all agencies would be applying common sense, that we at EPA must choose to both protect the environment and grow the economy, that it's not a binary choice. And we at the Trump EPA, under the leadership of President Trump, choose both, protect the environment and grow the economy. We'll go through a public comment period. We'll see what the American public has to say about everything that we put out right now on all of this. Now, one approach to it could follow agencies of the past and say, well, we just know best. There'll be no public comment period. That's what they've done over the last decade and a half. We could say, we're going to ignore the Supreme Court decisions in all of those cases that have come out. We could say, well, we'll just make up our own law where there's a ambiguity in statute. We'll ignore the economic consequences. We'll ignore the bad assumptions. We will ignore what proved not just to be pessimistic views of what was going to happen. We'd be ignoring what turned out to be inaccurate. But that's not the decision we make today in putting out this proposed rule. We at the Trump EPA have been delivered a mandate from this president, most importantly from the American public. President Trump called me on Sunday, November 11th, in the morning, asking me to take this position to be the administrator of EPA. President Trump wants us to do our part to help advance for all Americans clean air, land, and water. It gets to the core mission of EPA of protecting human health and the environment. I'm a conservative Republican who wants to be a great steward of the environment. And I have found that conservatives and others across ideologies, that Republicans and others across political parties have so much that we all can agree on to be great stewards of the environment. We're not going to ignore how emissions have been down. We're not going to ignore how American innovation has been on the rise. And President Trump said on that call that morning that he also wants us to be cognizant of the demand of the American public as it relates to the economy. And that's why powering the great American comeback also includes unleashing energy dominance. It includes advancing cooperative federalism and permitting reform, making America the AI capital of the world, and proudly and unapologetically doing our part to protect and bring back American auto jobs. I apologize to those members of my team who did a great job preparing great remarks that were in front of me, and to whomever on the team spent the hours getting it right, my apologies, but this one hits close to the heart for all of us. And the last thing I'll say is this. President Trump, he called me about a week ago to talk about tailpipe emissions. He was talking about the American auto industry. He was talking about American auto companies and wanting us to do our part to apply that common sense, to be cognizant of what that Trump mandate means. But we also have been focusing on the little things. See, our next speaker, Chris Wright, and I have had many conversations talking about topics like the flow coming out of a shower nozzle, the flow of gas out of a portable gas container, the start-stop feature that should be called a start-stop feature every time you come to a stop sign or a red light, as I've heard from so many Americans complaining about it. Just like they complain about how it takes 5 minutes to pour gas out of something that should take 45 seconds. We'll continue to have these conversations about refrigerants and so much more. Why? Because not just doing big things is what the American public demands of us, but also doing the small things to fix everything. Our next speaker, they call him Secretary Wright. They call me administrator. It doesn't matter what these titles are that they give us. Secretary Wright will introduce the governor, and we'll hear from others with titles. The only title that matters are titles like being a husband or a title like being a father. Selfless service is about all of us being here today for this cause, to put out this proposed rule to the American public, to respect these decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court, to respect the actual law of Section 202 of the Clean Air Act, and to heed the economic demands of the American public who call for actions like this proudly and unapologetically. And without any further ado, our next speaker, my colleague on the National Energy Dominance Council, the Vice Chair of the National Energy Dominance Council, Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright.
Wow, moved by the impassioned words from my friend and colleague. Today is a momentous day for liberty, for freedom, and for energy to drive betterment of your lives. And there is no better place to do this than right here in the heartland, the industrial capital of our country. I'm thrilled and honored to be here, and I'm here, and Administrator Zeldin is here only because American people decided firmly in favor of common sense, to bring back common sense to Washington, and they overwhelmingly elected President Trump to do that. And he takes that mission with a passion. He does not back down from any challenge, any threat to that. He believes in the American dream, and we're here to restore the American dream. It's deeply personal for me. I found out soon after I turned 13 that I was type 1 diabetic. If I was born any generation, except for the last few generations, that meant I didn't get a 14th birthday party. 13 was all I got. But in a modern world today, that's a condition that you live with. I'm going to die of old age. And it's increasingly easy to do, to live with it, because of the technologies, the innovation, and the energy that make the modern world possible. I think two things drove the rise of the modern world. It's only a few generations ago, human life expectancy was 30 years globally. Today it's 73. 90% of people lived in dire poverty. They didn't grow to the same size we are because they were in starvation. Two things changed the world. The growth of human liberty, bottom-up social organization. We ended slavery. Women were enfranchised. Governments didn't control everything and people were free. And they built this awesome world. The other piece was energy, the explosion in available energy from coal, oil, and natural gas. And then those energy sources in turn enabled other energy sources like nuclear, hydroelectric, wind, solar, everything else are derivative from hydrocarbons. Liberty and energy matter. When I heard the Endangerment Finding announcement 17 years ago that they had found, as someone who was already involved in the climate discussion, was already involved in the energy world, clearly they didn't look at the data, they didn't understand climate change, they didn't appreciate how energy works. But this ruling happened, and it happened because they couldn't do it through the House and the Senate and the presidency, the normal lawmaking process. They found a backdoor way to take away your freedom and to make your life more expensive and shrink your life opportunities. That's what they did, and that's what they've been doing for 17 years. We are here today, and so when Administrator Zeldin and I discussed this, we said we got to look at this thoughtfully and factually. We're not power-hungry people who want to control American lives. We want to set them free, and we want to follow the law and the institutions established by our awesome, truly awesome founding fathers of this country. And we set out, I reached out as someone who'd been in the climate world for 20 plus years. I reached out to 5 scientists. I had many more on my list, but the first 5 all said yes. I said, this is what I want you to do. I know you have worked in this field your career. You're smart, you're accomplished, and you have not been cowed by the politics of climate change. You've followed the data. You all have different views, but you follow the data and follow the facts. That's what America is going to do, and we need your help. And I initiated a study to create a report that's released today. It's on the DOE website. You'll see press releases about it. And it was to be an honest, credible, data and fact-driven assessment of climate change. That report went through some internal peer review at the Department of Energy and the national labs. Now the public is open to engage in a thoughtful dialogue about what is climate change. It is a real physical phenomenon. It's worthy of study. It's worthy of even some action. But what we have done instead is nothing related to the actual science of climate change or pragmatic ways to make progress. But this paper is released. I encourage everyone to read it and to engage into this topic. Because whether you're interested in climate change or not, the politics surrounding climate change have shrunk your life possibilities, have put your business here at threat. Can you imagine how much cargo we could transport around the country if you only could use an electric truck, which, by the way, offers roughly 0 reduction in greenhouse gas emissions? Electric vehicles are not climate tools, but they're politically popular because rich people like them, so they've been deemed to be climate solutions. We want to get back to science and data and facts. That's the plan of the Trump administration. That's the plan of Administrator Zeldin and I. We're excited to have that dialogue and to engage the American public on it, because the net result of this is going to be a more thoughtful world, a more prosperous world, a more opportunity-rich world. The practical application is going to be lower cost vehicles, lower cost consumer products, lower energy bills, and all the things Americans instinctually want. But that's a process. I'm prejudging my own opinion. We will go through a process with professional review, with the American public review on everything we're trying to do here. I believe today will go down as a momentous day for freedom and liberty in our country, brought to you by President Trump. I'll turn it over now to another leader who has been impassioned and thoughtful in this very issue about American industry and dynamism and common sense on climate change. Former Senator, now Governor, and my friend, Mike Braun.
What a pleasure to be here on a topic that I've talked about for a long time. 6 years I spent in the Senate. It was sometimes like talking to the side of your barn back home. I remember those conversations, never thought it would get to the point of what we're seeing now, where common sense and ideas that you can actually afford become the solutions and not your latest and greatest political idea that you're willing to borrow money from future generations to put into play. The other thing I'd like you to observe, one of the benefits of being there for 6 years is you develop relationships. And mine was about how you'd make government do a better job for its own citizens. Well, I realized fairly quickly that was going to be hard to do with 60 senators agreeing to something. That's how divided you are from enterprising through government and common sense that's going to actually deliver solutions. So when we went to reform education, I was delighted that we were called as one of a few governors to come out there. I said, be careful, I just left the place. I'm not coming out every 2 to 3 weeks, but I want to be involved because we're going to be an enterprising state that gets things done. And if you recall, a few months ago, probably the issue I've worked hardest on, fixed it in my own business 17 years ago. How do we quit spending so much on health care, on a system of expensive remediation that ought to be based upon wellness and prevention? You like that idea too? I would hope you would. So DC came to Indiana to roll that out. And now when you're looking at 2 big issues, what's going to be the new energy future? When the demand looks like a hockey stick, where it was flat as a pancake just a couple, 3 years ago. And I remember vividly, not more than a few months into my Senate term, when I had the biggest local political dust up, and you know who was dusting it up? About 200 to 250 farmers that were upset with our own IDEM running them down on the back 40 to actually argue with them about ditch management that hardly had any water in it. That's not going to happen under my administration either. So what government should be about is making sure, like I remember vividly, I think back in the late 60s when a river caught on fire. Remember the Cuyahoga River? Something wasn't working. That's kind of close to when the EPA was started back then. And you've got to have common sense regulation. But when it becomes the dynamic, and it's not entrepreneurialism, it's not local and state governments that are the driver, and it's the driver being bureaucracy and a federal government that isn't smart enough to know how to spend less than it takes in, and it's been going on for 4 to 5 decades. Something has got to give. This happening back in 2009, and the fact that we're pivoting here in 2025, and it's in our own state of Indiana, I'd say, hallelujah, way overdue. So if we want government that's based upon common sense, not borrowing money from our kids and grandkids, turning it back to the way the founders intended it to be, that's what you're seeing with the Trump administration. And look at how much kicking and struggling the other point of view is putting up. Where it is their growth business, they worship it like their church rolled into one with the printing press in the basement. Bad business plan. Ideally, this is going to be another example of what manifested itself in November of last year, and I am tickled pink that they are looking to Indiana to be that partner. And I can tell you, as a lifelong entrepreneur for 37 years, actually in the automotive business, I think I know a thing or two about it, and you can count on Indiana being for common sense and reining in government and getting things done. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my business partner in the state government that won't be shy about doing the same things I just talked about, our Attorney General, Todd Rokita.
Thank you, Governor, and you're exactly right. I'm Todd Rokita. I'm your Attorney General, and let me also welcome Chris Wright and my friend Lee Zeldin, who I served in Congress with, to Indiana. You know, gentlemen, you're at the crossroads of America. That's exactly what we call ourselves, and we do it not because of our location, not because of our infrastructure and roads, but because we have such a rich, ingrained history, auto industry here. You know, that goes back decades, even 100 years. So we make cars, we sell trucks, and so it's entirely appropriate that you're here today, and we thank you for being here today. You're going to hear, I'll be short because you're going to hear from a lot of us, but there are some people that I see in the audience as well that you're not going to hear from that deserve to be recognized, who've been part of this journey that I'll get into it in just a second, a part of this journey that got us here today and got these two gentlemen really to come to Indiana. I see Representative Baird in the audience. I see Congressman Messmer, former state senator, in the audience. Greg Good in the audience. I see Rick Niemeyer in the audience. I see our Solicitor General, James Barta, in the audience. And you can blame me for those who I've missed, but those are who I see. Thank you for being here. And here's another thing you can blame me for, especially all the haters who are going to report on this event today. Indiana, along with other Attorney General offices, were very, very instrumental and important for us to get to this day. Lee mentioned a couple lawsuits, Michigan, West Virginia, mentioned Major Questions Doctrine, mentioned the overturn of the Chevron Doctrine. Indiana and your Indiana Attorney General office with the Solicitor General were integral parts of all that. Just because our name wasn't on the lawsuit doesn't mean we weren't helping with the briefing, doesn't mean we weren't helping with the coordination and the moot court of it all. It's a collaboration between like-minded attorneys general and like-minded states that got the road paved, so to speak, to get us to where great leaders, because it only gets you so far. We removed some of the obstacles, but then you had great leaders that you just heard from, including President Trump, who you heard about this morning, that got us to this point, which is really going to be revolutionary. Do not listen to those haters. The sky will not fall. We have the cleanest air, the cleanest water since the Clean Air and Water Acts of the 1970s. We do more and better monitoring than any other country, most of which combined. And it's complete folly and complete ridiculousness to put the American people in a situation where they have less discretionary income, they can't meet their capacities because of ideological reasons. At a time when our competitors are putting 1 to 2 coal power plants online in a given week, China. But there are others. Now, who here believes that the air you're breathing didn't come or isn't going to other places in the world like China? So to put these kind of restrictions on people for no good reason, it will not have the effect that's been promised. It never will, because it's completely arbitrary. And this is what we argued in court, and this is how we won. There's only one reason for that, is because you want to put your own people down and because of your own ideology, and it's just wrong. This rule will be great. This rescinding of the bad rules will work. We will still have good clean air, good clean water, and we will still lead the nation on the responsible things to do. And I agree with Lee Zeldin, you cannot be a conservative unless you're willing to conserve God's green earth, and that's the stewardship we'll employ. And speaking of good stewardship, I'd like to introduce you to my successor in Congress, Congressman Jim Baird. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the EPA Administrator and my former colleague, Lee Zeldin, and the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, Governor Mike Braun, PACCAR, ATA, and our great car manufacturers for coming to Indianapolis today for this historic announcement. Today, I'm proud to stand with Administrator Zeldin and Secretary Wright as they put an end to the EPA's abuse of power when it comes to vehicle emissions and stand on the side of common sense with the great American automobile industry. Administrator Zeldin and Secretary Wright could not have picked a better place to make this announcement, as auto manufacturing is deeply entwined with the rich history of Indiana, supporting over 217,000 jobs and contributing over $30 billion to the gross state product. Under the Biden administration, electric vehicles receive thousands of dollars of subsidies per EV, all paid for by the American taxpayer. In fact, Americans who drive gas-powered cars have been subsidizing EVs to the tune of nearly $50,000 per EV. That ends today. President Trump's successful administration is putting an end to the radical climate policies of the past, reviving America's great auto industry, and promoting common sense, affordable, and reliable energy. This historic announcement will allow our great automakers to better meet consumer demand and continue to be a forefront of the global innovation in automobile production. Today is a huge win for American consumers and our auto industry, and I look forward to continuing to work with President Trump's administration to unleash America's energy dominance and to restore prosperity to our great American workers and this industry. Thank you. And now I'm proud to introduce Indiana's Secretary of Energy and Natural Resources, Suzanne Zavorsky, an outstanding Hoosier, and has been the energy policy leader in our federal and state government, as well as serving in the private industry.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Governor Braun. Thank you all for being here. It is such a pleasure to have the Administrator, Secretary of Energy here with our great governor in the state of Indiana. My name is Suzanne Zavorsky, Secretary of Energy and Natural Resources. I'm honored to be here with you on this momentous day. And as we mark this moment, it's important to understand what today truly represents. Not just a course correction, but a reaffirmation of common sense government and moving away from years of regulatory overreach that I think we've all seen and felt, whether it was at the grocery store or the gas pump. The rollback of the endangerment finding is more than a symbolic gesture. It's the decisive step towards restoring regulatory sanity and economic viability, both together at the same time. This returns environmental oversight to a level where practical solutions thrive, not political theater. Indiana has proven that environmental protection and economic growth are not mutually exclusive. In fact, like Governor Braun mentioned, our state has reduced emissions dramatically while growing our economy and attracting investments. That's the kind of model we now have the opportunity to scale nationally. And having these great leaders from the EPA and the U.S. Department of Energy see all that we have here in Indiana is a great day to shine for Indiana. Let's also be clear, this is a victory for American workers, small businesses, and communities across the entire country. This rollback lifts the burden of unworkable mandates and opens the door to smarter, more localized approaches that actually deliver clean air and water without crushing innovation and the true American spirit that makes us great. We are now free to refocus on outcomes, not ideologies. Let this be the beginning of a new chapter where sound science, state leadership, and energy independence guide our path forward. Today, we celebrate this return to reason. I'm thrilled to introduce to you somebody who's at the forefront of this, Gary Langston, who's the president of the Indiana Motor Trucking Association. Gary?
Thank you, Secretary Wright, Administrator Zeldin, and the others present here today for your leadership. Trucking, as you know, is the lifeblood of our economy, without which our nation would grind to a halt. That's why we need good partners in government who understand our industry and what it takes to deliver for America. When it comes to reducing environmental impact, few industries have gone the distance like trucking has as the result of innovation and collaboration. Modern trucks produce 99% fewer emissions than a generation ago. It takes 60 of today's trucks to emit what one truck did in 1988. The prior administration's electric truck mandate threatened to derail that progress by ignoring the economic and operational realities of trucking. That mandate forced a single, unproven technology onto an extremely complex and varied industry where one size does not fit all. There are many reasons why this mandate was doomed to fail. Electric trucks cost 2 to 3 times more than today's internal combustion engine-powered vehicles. They transport far less cargo because of their massive weight. Their range is 1,000 miles less than a clean diesel engine. They require long periods of unproductive downtime for charging. They consume an enormous amount of energy, and the charging infrastructure is nowhere near ready to support the mandated timeline. This mandate put our industry on a path to economic ruin. It set the American trucker up for failure, which in turn sets the consumer up for failure. It also minimized innovation by ignoring other low-emission technologies that are within our reach, including renewable diesel, natural gas, and hybrids. Renewable diesel, for example, provides double the environmental benefit compared to battery electric at a small fraction of the cost. When regulators work with our industry rather than against it, the sky is the limit to what we can achieve. Thankfully, the leadership we are seeing today is returning us to a path of common sense, allowing us to reduce our environmental impact and continue to deliver for the American people. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers. In conclusion, I want to thank our host, Palmer Trucks. Founded in 1965 by Eldon Palmer. It's been in his family now for 3 generations. The business is now owned and operated by his son-in-law, John Nichols, with Palmer's grandsons, Jacob and Scott, helping as well. Palmer Trucks is a full-service Kenworth dealership network with operations in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and Illinois. And today this organization employs 650 employees across these states. So thank you to Palmer Trucks and to the family for hosting. And with that, we're happy to answer your questions. I got yours here. Yes.
Yes, hi. My name is Rebecca Thiel. I'm with Indiana Public Broadcasting. Excuse me, I'm a little sick. This question is actually for Governor Braun, if you had a minute. Obviously, there were a lot of electric vehicle battery plants that were planned for Indiana. Is there any concern that these battery plants would no longer want to come into the state or continue operating in the state with these changes? Thank you.
I think it's a great example of where government got ahead of common sense and even the marketplace. I remember vividly, probably about 3 years ago, when 5,400 light-duty truck dealers said, and car dealers, quit sending us EVs, we can't sell them. The time may be to where we need it, but when you try to mandate it through government, you create a host of issues. And you heard some of the stats when you're now looking at 99% fewer emissions compared to what it was years ago, and the fact that you got to take the global economy politically and economically into context. If businesses want to come here and they're doing it on sound decisions that make sense, we are the most inviting state in the country for a good business climate. If it's being dictated by bad policy through government from the very top down, it doesn't make sense. Economic growth and development sooner or later has to be based upon common sense, what the markets want, not what government and politicians may tell you that you need.
And I would just add a very important point about something Governor Braun just got at when he was referencing global. When the EPA in 2009 did the endangerment finding, it was unprecedented that Section 202 would be utilized in a way looking at combating global climate change. In the past, because Section 202 does require EPA to regulate specified pollutants. And in the language, in the precedent, the way that the EPA followed Section 202, the analysis was always on local and regional impacts. This was the first time, again, many mental leaps, because they couldn't just say carbon dioxide endangers human health and welfare. They couldn't say it. That's why they mixed it with all the other well-mixed gases, including some not emitted from mobile sources. That's why they didn't draw a direct link from that to endangering human health and welfare. Instead, they had to try to connect it to climate change. And that's why they had to connect it to fighting global climate change, because the numbers didn't add up when you just look at local and regional. There's so much about this that was unprecedented, filled with mental leaps not included in the plain text or the precedent at the EPA. Next question.
Hi, Hannah Adamson, Fox 59 CBS 4 News here in Indy. Although emissions have gone down, they are trending downward. The American Lung Association still lists the Indianapolis metro area as 11th worst for year-round particle pollution. Where does that balance lie between dereg and bettering that number, and how long will the public comment period last?
The public comment period will last for 45 days. The proposed rule is signed today. The process was that it was going through the interagency process. We had sent a proposed rule a few weeks back to the Office of Management and Budget and OIRA. The interagency process was taking place. We're going to go into the public comment period. It'll be 45 days. The rule will be finalized after the public comment period. And your question also gets to the heart of my last point just before you asked it. EPA, following the practice that they always had and interpreting Section 202 strictly, would have never reached the endangerment finding to then regulate the heck out of greenhouse gas emissions from light, medium, and heavy-duty trucks if that's what they were looking at. Even back then, even the Obama EPA in 2009 did not have the science at that moment where they couldn't rely on that for that finding. That's why they had to try this outside the box, many mental leaps, including trying to fight global climate change. And the other thing that I'll add too is while emissions have been down over the course of the last couple decades here in the United States, you have other nations. I heard China was referenced here. There are other nations that continue to increase emissions, and all of us strangulating our own economy, regulating the heck out of American families and American industries, and cutting off sources of baseload power, and finding new ways to put trillions of dollars of new handcuffs around the American family. None of that, zero, does anything, will do anything to combat the reality that emissions keep on going down here in the US, innovation keeps going up, and in China and elsewhere, they continue to pollute even more. Next question.
Hi, I'm Lee Berner from Chemical and Engineering News. My question is about this Department of Energy report that Chris Walsh said was released today. I haven't seen it yet, but you mentioned that it went through an internal peer review. Did it go, like, what did that entail? And is it going to go through an external peer review? And also, is this being used instead of the National Climate Assessment?
Yes. So the internal review was scientists at the DOE Department of Science and from our national labs. It was brief. We wanted to get this document out there. Absolutely, now it'll be open for comment from scientists around the world or anyone else that wants to comment about it. What we really want to do is bring climate science into the same realm we treated all science in the past, which is critical thinking, challenging, basing things on data and facts. And if your model doesn't match the data, you can't hide the data, you got to fix your model. We want to end the cancel culture, Orwellian future reality we've been in, where climate change is just not treated as a serious science. It's treated as a political force to silence and shame people. That's just not what science is about. And I think an important understanding of climate change is just so important for people. As the discussion was just held there, when the Clean Air Act came out, it was to regulate 6 criteria pollutants: particulate matter, ground level ozone, SOx, NOx, lead, and carbon monoxide. All of them that have toxic effects on human health. I grew up in Denver. So when I was a kid, you couldn't see the Colorado mountains 1 out of 4 days. We had a brown cloud. We had a huge pollution problem. The population's quadrupled, the economy's grown more than that, and the air is just dramatically cleaner. The Clean Air Act was aimed at toxins. It's been remarkably successful. 75% reduction in US emissions of the 6 criteria pollutants, with like a 40% growth in population and a tripling of the economy. So we can do things, but greenhouse gases are not toxic to humans, right? They absorb infrared radiation. They're a very different mechanism. Even the people who study them don't claim that they're a top problem of the world. It's only activists and politicians that make these kind of outrageous claims you hear all the time.
Garrett Bergquist
just to add, as far as a list of the scientific studies reviewed as part of the preamble of the proposal. By the way, the proposed rulemaking that's going out public is just over 300 pages. About half of that is a preamble. In it, it lists the review of the many studies that were part of developing the preamble. It includes the U.S. Global Change Research Program's 5 national climate assessments and 6th assessment report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That was included during the development of the proposal. I also reviewed and our team reviewed studies from publications such as Institute for Clinical Evaluative Studies, Journal of Marine Science, Global Change Biology, Nature Climate Change, Journal of Forecasting, Climate Dynamics, Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society, and the Journal of Hydrology. We also have Lundberg's 2016 Impact of Current Climate Proposals that was in Global Policy, and those are a sample of many of the references used while developing that preamble. Next question.
This is the final question, sir. Garrett Bergquist, Wish TV, Indianapolis. In effect, if placed into effect as currently envisioned, does this rule effectively reset the emission standards for autos, light, medium, heavy-duty trucks back to 2008 standards? What sorts of things would be left in place? What would be taken out?
As it relates to greenhouse gas emission standards on light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty, it doesn't reset anything. It eliminates everything. This proposed rule is a proposal to eliminate the endangerment finding, to eliminate greenhouse gas standards, all the regulations that came out, including the electric vehicle mandates, all of the greenhouse gas standards for light, medium, and heavy duty. And as a bonus, we're also proposing to get rid of that much hated off-cycle credit for start-stop technology. There's a lot included in this rule. It's over 300 pages, and I would encourage everyone to read it. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. This is an exciting day for our country. It's an exciting day for Indiana, for us in the Trump administration. We were all here in Indiana when the announcement was made. The proposal for what would, if finalized, amount to the largest deregulatory action in the history of the United States. Thank you all for being here.